All right, the first thing we're going to do is open up the DPS Turbonator software, and this is after you've done the install of the software and the driver. We're going to plug in our USB port, and you're simply and make sure that your truck power is on, or your truck doesn't have to be running, but the power has to be on. And you're going to hit connecting, and the little USB tab will start flashing green and red. As soon as you do, you're going to open up, expand out all of your tabs here, so you can see what we have. The very first thing I'm going to walk through is the map sensor. Make sure the map sensor and exhaust pressure sensor are on the 100 PSI gauge, the DPS 100 PSI gauge. If those aren't, choose the DPS 100 PSI gauge. The next one is the engine speed. This is where you select your year of truck, and if it's a newer truck, an 07.5 to 2018, you're still going to connect the 03 to 07 crank and cam sensor, or cam sensor. I generally choose the crank sensor on this one. So any truck newer than 2003, you're going to select this option. The next thing we're going to go to, under the VGT control logic, you're going to go to the drive. We're not going to worry about the static ratio. This is if you go into and want to run a single pressure ratio through the entire curve. You can. Rarely do people use this. We're going to go into the variable ratio. This is where most of the controlling of the VGT is done. This here is if you want to change your starting position or change any of the ratios here, this is where you do it. I'm going to explain that in a minute. I'm just going through the step-by-step of each tab. The next one is exhaust brake control. Under here is if you're a truck that is a 2007.5, 6, 7 or newer, or if you're trying to read the app sensor or the throttle position sensor, you're going to select active low here. And you're going to put this on a Dodge, you're going to put this to 0.6 or somewhere around there. That means it starts at about a 0.5. That means when you touch the throttle, it will jump beyond this point. This is what determines where your brake voltage kicks on at. So 6, 7 trucks, 07.5 and newer, are going to go active low here. If you're an 03 to 07, any of the older trucks, 07 and older, you're going to select active high, and you're going to set the voltage here to 7 volts. If you're on active high, always put this at 7 volts. If you're at active low, you're going to be right around 0.6 volts. If that's too low, you could go to 0.65 or whatever, but that's generally where the brake trigger will kick on and off at, is 0.6. Okay, so right here, this brake trigger voltage is what you see coming down the line from your throttle position sensor or your app switch. Desired brake pressure, we have it set at 40 psi here. If you have the spring on your actuator, you put this, you can go to 40, maybe a little higher. If you don't, you're going to want to stop at 33 psi. The next thing we have is the cold start wet stack. This simply, it enables the cold start to go for a certain period of time after the truck fires up if you have your crank or cam sensor hooked up. In other words, if you're reading your engine RPM, you can use this. Otherwise, disable it by unchecking this. This is only for cold start warm-up procedures. Gauges, if you kick on the gauges, it gives all of this is where you can data log. If you hit start, it starts your data logging if you're going to drive the truck around and want to see how it's running or want to see what's going on, and all the other feedback that comes through there. So input voltages, this is the last of the tabs. These two input voltages are going to be coming in from your boost and exhaust pressure gauges that we provide with the system. And I'll just show you as I'll actually blow into this. You can see it changes the pressure on the exhaust a little bit. Now, if you're running your truck, the exhaust voltage will bounce around a bit. Okay, now I'm going to quickly show you how to adjust a couple things. On variable ratio, the biggest problem we have is people well, the very biggest problem, I'm going to go to exhaust brake. If your system is not shifting properly or not actuating if the actuator is not moving when you're driving, typically you've got the RPM hook here and it's not reading your RPM signal correctly. Either it's not hooked up or it's not reading correctly. Simply, if you'll click bypass brake engine RPM disengage, that will take away the system's watching your throttle position to disengage the brake or engage it at low RPM. So it just will function. The brake will be on when you let off the throttle, and it will go off when you give it throttle. So if you're having issues, very first thing, click that thing, get rid of that, turn it off. Before you hit save, this is the last thing you're gonna do, and we're gonna fix this on our future versions, but right now you have to save from this screen only. So you save, when you hit save, it's only from the exhaust screen, and you always have to change this to the voltage you want right before you save. It does not record this, and it will shortly. So let's go into variable ratio and go through these adjustments really quick. If I want to change the starting position, I'm going to simply change it. And I'll pull an actuator over here so you can see it. So if I change the starting position to, let's say I go to 10, and I will never go. The starting position generally is going to range from 41 to maybe 50 in that realm. So I'm not going to hit save here. I always go to exhaust brake control, and I turn this up to 0.6 before I hit save. Or if I'm on active high, I go to 7 volts, 7.0. So if I'm on active low, 0.6, active high. So I'm gonna hit the save settings and see how it jumps to that position. Now if I go back to variable ratio, I look, it's starting at 10, commanded 10, feedback at 11. It means it's reading that feedback. If you're within about 2 or 3 decimal places, or 2 or 3 numbers here of what the commanded is, you're good. Okay, so I'm gonna set this back to 48 as a start position, and I'm going to go into my exhaust brake control again, turn this to 0.6. Now, if it was active high, I'll do this time. I'll go active high and go to 7. So if I'm active high, I go to 7. If I'm active low, I go to 0.7. Anyway, I'm gonna click this, and it will save the new start position. Okay, and so back in variable ratio, in general, if you have a compound setup, you can go up to like 55 on this one. But the second highest one, you want to be probably 3 to 5 away from the highest, because that will really determine how it runs at that point. So that's the very basics on this thing. And troubleshooting, here's some general things to troubleshoot with. The first thing is you absolutely have to make sure that under exhaust brake control, if this is unchecked, that your RPMs are reading, that you're reading the correct RPM, and that you have this set at a disengage. This means at 900 RPMs, this thing's going to disengage the exhaust brake. But if you have this on at 900 RPMs and it never goes below 900 RPMs because it's not hooked up, it will never ever disengage the exhaust brake. And so you'll be driving around and you'll be wondering why it's not working, and the exhaust brake will be on the whole time. So turn it off if you're not going to use that feature, if you don't have the crank sensor hooked up. Under input voltages, you should see an exhaust brake trigger voltage coming down the line. This should generally be probably at idle around 0.5. If you throttle the truck, it should go up somewhere around, whatever you push it to. But once it crosses 0.6 volts, you'll see that releases the brake.
If you can't get it to work, generally the problem is in the exhaust brake control. Once you set the initial start position lower than it came, say it was at 48 and you wanted to set it at 40, or you were setting it down to like 0 to calibrate it, if it will not go down there, then you have to rev the truck to get the values to start shifting after you hit save. because it puts it into a reset once it starts to search for a new position. And revving it, that's how you get to jump to that lower position.